Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's FIDO Alliance webinar. This is the second webinar in a four-part series around our newest design guidelines. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about how authentication experiences can help you meet key metrics and business goals. Before we get started, everyone's favorite part of the webinar, and I say this every time, so I'm so sorry you have to listen to me do this every time, but I will go over some housekeeping notes. So you will notice that you are in listen-only mode. You have a number of widgets at your disposal on the On24 platform. So please leverage the question widget to ask your questions. We will be saving time for Q&A. We are recording the webinar, and you will have access to the recording following the webinar, as well as the slides that you are viewing today. In terms of what we're going to be leveraging for widgets, so you have a slides widget and a media player widget. I would advise you to have both open because we will be pushing some videos to you, and those actually come through the media player where you see my face right now, I hope, and you can hear me, I hope. That's where the videos will be pushed to, and then the slides, of course, will be displayed through the slides widget, which you can see it says, welcome to the webinar. Please also stay on for the duration of the webinar, and at the end, please take the survey. This really helps to inform our educational materials, these types of webinars that we deliver, and get your thoughts on today's session. So as I mentioned, this is a four-part webinar series all around our new design guidelines on FIDOalliance.org. We do have one that we did last week, which was our foundational webinar that you can find on demand now. If you registered for all of the sessions, you should be able to access this one that's on demand. If not, you can go to the registration page and just re-register, and you can access that. We also will be having another webinar next week around how you can drive revenue and decrease costs with passkeys, and the experiences you can enable through our design guidelines to make that happen. And then our favorite, the AMA. So we often get too many questions during these webinars, so we love to dedicate an entire session just to ask the questions that we've saved over the past weeks, and you can attend and you can ask a panel of experts anything, really. Within reason. Before we get started on our content, I wanted to just mention that the FIDO Alliance working group, the UX working group, is probably our most robust and well attended working group. There are all these companies that come together in order to drive our UX work and our design guidelines. We are very thankful for all of their contributions. These are UX experts from all over the globe that are and they're companies that are so committed to seeing passkeys thrive and be successful that these folks dedicate their time to the efforts of UX. We also work with a third-party UX research firm, Blink, that helps us with our UX research and the outputs that you see come out of the UX working group. And finally, we really couldn't make this happen without our underwriters. So UX research, all this work that we put forward through the UX working group is very costly, and we are a nonprofit association. So I want to personally thank 1Password, Cisco Duo, Dashlane, Google, HID, Trusona, US Bank, and Yubico for underwriting our research and the outputs that allow us to bring sessions like this to you today. Please help me welcome our great speakers for today. We have Leo from MasterCard, Elizabeth from Intuit, and Court from Google. They are not only with their UX and content strategists, they're not only leaders in UX and content for their own companies, but they are also key members of our UX working group. So welcome, Leo, Elizabeth, and Court. And now let me pass things over to Leo, who will kick things off.
Hi everyone, my name is Leo. I'm a product designer on the identity services team at MasterCard. My team is primarily focused on innovation, so very often I wear multiple hats from concept to design and research. But my overall role is to ensure we deliver the right solutions to our users. And this presentation is mainly focused around this topic. Very often, the right solution starts with a vision. And thankfully, at MasterCard, people with visions are not recommended to see a doctor. Instead, we are encouraged to truly understand the problem we are trying to solve, the value of our business, and how to position it in a way so that we are fully supported by our stakeholders. So let me take a second to briefly define what I think the right solution means. What are the prerequisites for a successful solution? First, it solves the problem for the end users, businesses, business partners, or both. But it solves that problem in a way which is easy and convenient and accessible. That's number one. Number two, it adds value to your business. And three, is supported by everyone within the business. As I said earlier, without business support, a go-to-market strategy would not be possible. So I would like to walk through each one of these three pillars from the perspective of a global payments business like MasterCard and understand how passkeys can solve one of the most challenging issues financial services currently have, which is account takeover. Passkeys are a good example of how the first two pillars converge in a way that makes it easy to build a business case for support throughout your business. So a full circle, which is ideal. Starting with the first one, it solves the problem. Probably the most serious threats in the payment industry are fraud, scams, and account takeovers. And every report launched in the last couple of years will tell you the same thing. These threats are ever increasing year after year. Here are a few examples. 354% increase year on year, that's account takeover attacks in 2023, resulting in roughly 13 billion losses in the US alone. And it's very difficult, perhaps impossible, to quantify these attacks on a global level, since not every region are running studies on this topic. And finally, almost 22% of US adults have been victims of some form of account takeover. That's almost 1 in 5. Unfortunately, that's not all. Account takeover is just a small subset of identity theft fraud. The overall identity theft losses in the US are around 43 billion last year, according to these referenced studies. So I think we have outlined a pretty serious problem, not just for the end users, but for businesses as well. Next, it adds value to your business. Unlike passwords, which are often weak, reused across multiple websites and apps, susceptible to breaches, passkeys offer a significant upgrade in terms of security. Passkeys not only enhance security, but also significantly improve the user experience by simplifying the authentication process. Users no longer need to remember and manage multiple passwords. Instead, they can log in with a single gesture, like a fingerprint or face recognition. And in terms of cost savings, yes, maintaining a password-based system means significant expenses, but to me, the more valuable cost saving is loss prevention during a data breach, for example, or damage brand reputation, which takes years and a lot of investment to build. Finally, the third one it's supported by everyone within your business. Look, if there was a magic button, the pressing of which would replace all the passwords in the world with passkeys, I would go ahead and press it. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Every passkey implementation journey is different when you account for diverse environments, diverse industries, regulated, unregulated, diverse countries. However, stakeholder support, I think, is crucial for delivering a new product like passkeys into the market. And one way to gain your team support is by developing a compelling business case. Thankfully, that should be easy, as we've seen in the first two pillars from a user authentication standpoint. Passkeys have a lot of advantages compared to passwords, but perhaps the most important in terms of key benefits is security. You can also present success stories from companies who have gone through this experience with amazing results. And the FIDOalliance.org website has a lot of these success stories. Okay, now to the fun stuff. As I briefly mentioned earlier, the most serious threats in the payment industry are fraud, scams, and account takeovers. But today's demo is more about SMS OTP being used as a second factor authentication and why we see it vulnerable to account takeover attacks. And now I would like to enable the video module, because the following slides will have videos as well. Meet Jamie and Alex. Jamie, a marketing professional who loves managing her finances digitally, like most of us nowadays. Alex, on the other hand, has slightly different passions, as you might tell from his surname. He loves using his deceptive tactics to obtain secure SMS OTP codes. I think you can guess where this is going, but let's see. As usual, Alex is looking for easy money. He managed to get Jamie's partner bank login details on the black market. So he goes ahead and tries to access her accounts. A lot of high-risk use cases use a second factor or multi-factor for verification. Here, an SMS OTP code is required to access the account. Of course, the second factor is not going to stop Alex, so he calls Jamie and, using his deceptive charm, convince her she just won $1,000 voucher. All she has to do is tell Alex the winning code. Excited about the news, obviously, Jamie gives Alex the SMS OTP code the bank has sent her. And now Alex can use that OTP securely to log in into Jamie's bank accounts. And from here, I leave it to your imagination what can happen next. Here's another example. Let's say this time Alex didn't manage to get Jamie's password, but he has her email and mobile number. These two identity attributes are widely available online in general. So let me play the video. This time, instead of logging in, he clicks on Forgot Password. And he is prompted to enter the SMS OTP. And from here, the story is similar, except for Alex. It's much easier to go in and change Jamie's password and take over her account, since the entry point was forgot password. So we've seen how SMS OTPs as a second factor verification are not just vulnerable to identity fraud attacks, but have a huge cost associated when used at large scale. Let's see what Jamie can do to avoid the hypothetical trauma she's been through earlier. Partner Bank just launched passkeys for its customers, and Jamie wants to secure her account. I'm going to play the video now. So right after she verifies her identity, she is prompted to register a new passkey with her bank. As we know, the private key meant to solve the relying party challenge never leaves her mobile phone, which is secure. Okay. Next time Jamie wants to access her account securely, it takes, I'm going to play the video now. It takes less than a second to get in. The multi-factor aspect of this process has drastically changed for the better. And I can explain. Two-factor or multi-factor authentication in the financial sector in general means using two of the following criteria: something you know, something you have, or something you are. Any of these two will be good enough for authentication. So what has changed in the case of Partner Bank from the old to unsecure proofs of something you know, like a password, and something you have, which was proven via SMS OTP. When you use a passkey, you must use a device that stores the passkey, and that proves something you have, and unlock it with face or fingerprint recognition, and that means something you are. And I'll pass down to Elizabeth.
Excellent. Thank you, Leo, for explaining. I mean, those things are terrifying, those scenarios. So it's always like every time I see them, I know they're real, and then I'm like, I'm frightened. But this is why we have passkeys, right? And it's really great to kind of see all the reasons and all the, the numbers are always just keep going up and up about why this is important. So as far as convincing our business partners that this is, critical, is the stories right there. I'm going to kind of like go deeper into one of the KPIs that my team, I work at Intuit. I'm a senior content designer on the identity team, and I work on the authentication space. And, when we get down to the nitty gritty of implementing passkeys, like adoption is like a big thing that, and that I care about, right? Like we need people to use these and sign up for them and register for them so that we can protect them. And then we'll get the great numbers on reduced fraud and all that. But one of the big questions, like, I'm so glad I'm here today because like my team is literally like delivering designs to our engineers right now. So we are getting ready to implement this, sooner than later. And we're excited. We've been working on it for, gosh, I feel like it's been over a year, and it's complex. And so I'm going to dig a little deeper into the content design part and the process of like, especially if you're here and you haven't implemented it yet and you're new to it and you're trying to kind of figure out like, how do we do this? What have you guys done? What's worked? What hasn't worked? I'm going to give you a little case study of sort of what I'm working on, particularly from the content lens, but it really applies to like engineers, product managers, designers, everybody. So this is about the guidelines, right? We're going to talk about these great FIDO guidelines and then kind of how to use it for your own thing, which is what I've been learning. So first I want to talk about these guidelines. We've mentioned them. We're going to keep talking about them because one, we've all worked on them in there. They've been really fun to create for all of you and use. So I use these a lot. And I made it really apparent here. Here's the website. You can just search for FIDO Passkeys Design Guidelines if you forget and you want to find it. But this is just a snapshot of the page that we landed on. And the part that I use, because I'm a content designer, was the content principles. And this really, like, the magic of it is that this has talking about, using familiar language and what kind of language to use, where to use the language, where to have the conversation. To me, that was a big eye opener. The FIDO Alliance does a lot of user testing to create these guidelines. And so part of that was like, where should we even talk about this, right? Customers they're not like, I can't wait to go sign in. They're there to go do their work, get into their product like that. They don't want to sign in or create an account. That's not the fun part. They want to get to the next thing. So to get out of their way, it's like, we want to make it faster to do that, but where do we insert ourselves in this conversation they're having, and so we can get them on board with passkeys and, you know, adopt them and increase security. So that's really a neat part of it. And to me, like in the content principles, but really in all the principles, you can learn about kind of where to do this, but then we also have very specific examples. You can like literally take the content, just steal it, like steal the ideas. That's how we created them for you. And so that's where I started my project. I was like, let me go steal some ideas first. I will say on this other side of the screen with the UX principles, as a content designer, you know, we're always working hand in hand with the rest of our team, with our product designers, with our engineers, with our product managers. So to me, it's important that we read all of these, all of us read all of these, because it really gives us the bigger picture of how we're going to implement this, so that I know what my designer's thinking and we can work in tandem to get the, you know, the words and the pictures right, basically, kind of the thing. So so I recommend, you know, if you're a content person, dive right into this part that's in the purple, but definitely like check out all of it. We've created it in a very digestible way, so it's fun to read, lots of pictures, very cool. So that's my pitch for this, but this is where I started. So if you're on your journey and you're like, where to begin, this is a great place to go to get the foundation of how you, a way to think about passkeys and maybe, you know, how you want to implement it and where. But then I'm going to flip the script on you. I did some testing. So this is what I recommend is, you know, we created it. We did the user testing for e-commerce. We did a specific scenario. We tried to keep them broad so everyone can use them, but everyone's different. Like Intuit is a financial services company. There's regulations. There's a lot of security protocol and policies that might mean that our design looks a little different. Our conversation looks a little different. So so I had that in mind, and my team, you know, we were wondering, like, is our audience different than these guidelines, you know, used? And maybe we should do a check. So if you have the time and the resources and the ability to do user testing, I highly recommend it, because it can really help you narrow down on how you want to talk about passkeys to your customers to, you know, get those adoption KPIs up, right? That's what I want. And if I can say it in the right way to them, then, you know, can persuade them to try this new technology that they may not be familiar with, or they might have seen a little bit somewhere else, but you know, here it is at Intuit all of a sudden. So a quick look at what I tested. So Intuit, we have multiple products on our platform, but we're going to be launching primarily with like TurboTax and QuickBooks, and they're really different. You know, when you look at these customers, TurboTax customers, we're there to do taxes. They show up like once a year. They maybe log in maybe 1 to 3 times to finish their taxes, and then they're gone for another year. They have different pain points. Like they do forget their password. And a lot of times you'll see content about passkeys that's like, oh, get rid of your pesky password. And that's great for these guys. But when you look at our QuickBooks customers, my hypothesis is that they sign in like every day. They're working on their business, they're doing accounting, there might be a bookkeeper, and this is like literally their daily day-to-day job. They're signing all the time. Their password saved in the password manager. So they actually don't care about this like ease of use of password. Like they're like, it's no big deal. It fills in anyway. I don't care. So I kind of looked at that and was like, is the messaging right for my customer? So let me look at them. So that's where I did this research, because I really wanted to kind of drill down. So my hypothesis going in was I wanted to use Google's headline, because I'll shout out to Court, because this is like the best headline: simplify your sign-in. I tried to do better, and I couldn't write anything better. This is like the beauty of passkeys. It's simple. And so I loved this, and I told my team, and they're like, well, but we really want to talk to the customers and find out. And I was like, okay, let's stop and do that. So I ran a few more by my customers. This is like, everyone saw these, all the QuickBooks customers, all the TurboTax that I studied, and we had people signing up and signing in. I had one about security. Like I was really going, because you really got the convenience play and the security play for passkeys. Those are like the big benefits. So I went like, this is about convenience, simplify your sign-in with security messages in the subtext. This is really hard on security and speed, which is a little convenience. So I did that. And then I also did like, sometimes I like to try something new. So I did this sort of like, is it okay if we add more security to your account? Because like, who would say no to that? So I thought I'd try that to see if that would resonate with the customers. Then I did a little special thing, because it's possible that we could start to segment these messages out and show different things to different groups. So for the people creating an account, I wanted to try, let's finish your security setup by adding a passkey. Made it part of the process. No big deal. You do all your other stuff, and then you're like, this is the last step, and you're in. And then for the people signing in, the password thing, they've already got an account, they have a password. I wanted to like mention that they could like trade in their password for a passkey. So hopefully you're following where I'm going with all these different versions. There are a lot of variations, and picked these, tested all the people. Oh, like pretty much everyone loved this like security, and I was kind of surprised, but everyone generally like really liked this. They thought simplify your sign-in was cool, Court, so they liked it. They did good. They were like, that's like catchy, but boy, I really like security. So apparently my people love security, and so I honor that. Funny thing, this question, that they hated it. They hated it so much. They were like, "Oh, it feels like you're making me doubt things." So that was a surprise that I learned. So great to test, because everyone hated it. And then create account people loved this, adding this step. So I might try that as an experiment for, like once we launch our first thing, I might see if we see like our adoption numbers are not quite as high, I might try that for create account people just to bump them up. And then no one was very much into this one. They were like, I don't think they struggle with passwords. I don't think our customers, that's not their biggest problem. So that was a good way for me to learn that. And the last fun note was, I had a different subhead here mentioning phishing resistant. And a lot of people were like, that's too big of a word about security. But people loved it. I think it was like, really, they knew the word phishing. They were like, I love this. It really sounds secure. And I was like, okay, cool. So I'll show you the final is that I went with the stronger security, and then my subhead did the phishing resistant. So we're going to see how it goes. I haven't launched this yet, but this is how I got. So I just like to let y'all in on the behind the scenes. But the biggest thing to me was, we had these amazing guidelines. They gave me such a strong foundation. And then I was able to test this with my actual customers and what I knew about them from previous tests and other things, and like use that, write things I think they're going to want, find out they hate the question, and find out they love phishing resistant, and just really narrow it down for them. So that's what we're going to run. We're going to launch with this. And then I have these backup plans, right? If they hate this and the adoption is low, I might try to simplify your sign-in, because that the court told me to. Or I might try the thing for the create account people, because they might really like that. So I have like a whole folder of backup plans. So take the guidelines, use them as your foundation, but if you can test, or even if you can't test, use what you know about your audience to fine tune it. I did see a really great question in the Q&A about, we say a lot about like face, fingerprint, screen lock, and it's hard to figure that one out, because my native team was like, we don't call it screen lock, and they're very Apple focused. And so like a lot of people debate this, and I'm like, we're on all of, it's hard to kind of figure it out. So my conclusion has come to be like if you can customize it where you need to, where it's really important, if I have so many of those people that love security, I'm going to go for that. If you have people if your whole audience says passcode, then knock yourself out. I would just use passcode. I just kind of do what they need, but again, use the foundation. So the last little quick summary of what I learned, these are kind of the surprises. I know you'd think I would know this, but it just dawned on me that these people have different styles. The TurboTax QuickBooks people and the QuickBooks people are just really different. And we don't always ask them the questions that I asked in my test. So I learned wow, these TurboTax people they really do care about convenience. They're like, get me in, make this a step in the process. They don't care about security as much as I had hoped they would. QuickBooks customers super like to evaluate. They were thoughtful. They read everything on the screen, thought things through more than I would expect. But when you think about it, they're like running businesses, and they're bookkeepers. They spent a lot of money on this product, so they're going to be more discerning. So that was an interesting surprise to me about the mindsets of our customers and how those can really shape the way we present new technology and new ideas and get adoption, because we got it on point for their needs. Another surprise, skipping, this isn't bad. So we have a little skip, tiny little skip thing here. If they don't want to add a passkey right now, crazy people. No, and a lot of people skipped it and said, thank you for the option. And I was like, wow, okay. And then it's a surprising little note was when they're shopping for software, deciding if they want to use it, a lot of them just felt like they didn't want to have the passkeys relationship yet. They were like, oh, we're still dating. I don't want to commit to this. But they would like the option to come back. So I wanted to skip right now because I want to go evaluate the product, see if I want to buy it or use it, and then I want to add a passkey later when I really do like kind of want to create my real account and like be in there. So that was an interesting learning that I had not thought of. And then the last one, which I've been singing to my team, is like, y'all, this may not happen overnight. So I know adoption is our KPI and the business is really into it, and that's how we're going to show the success of this project. But there's just people who are like, I'm just not into new tech. And they're just like there are a few that are just a hard no, like, nope, skip, never going to do this. Some just practical, like my phone doesn't support the biometrics, or, my phone doesn't do that. And they're just not into it. So there's like maybe 10% of the people that are just like hard no, not going to do this. And I feel like we should bake that into our expectations so that when we give a number that we want to hit, it's not going to be totally crazy. Now, over time, I think these people will adopt, right? So it's really more of a long game, right? So I think it's kind of like, let's say that off the bat, it's going to take a little while, but as all of us start implementing it, people will see it, and we're going to like kind of create this cool like collective excitement about it, but it's going to take time. So just like anything that's good, it'll kind of bake in, and it'll be no big deal, except for those like handful of people who are just like, I don't do that. So that's my takeaway. And just a lot of good stuff. I just recommend like using the foundation, then testing and find out what you learn for your business and your audience. So with all that said, I'm going to pass it over to Cork. She's been she's been in it. She's simplify your sign in all day long. So I want to hear more about kind of how it's going, and then, what you've learned about the adoption and the KPIs and the business and all that good stuff now that you're like, veteran.
Oh, well, I don't know about all that veteran talk. I did write Simplify Your Sign-In, but true to your point, I will say that as we've expanded out to other platforms and other particular cohorts of users, we've been intentionally experimenting ourselves with the nuances of the benefits of passkeys as we kind of go into critical mass. Like we had, our initial rollout in 2023. We've seen huge adoption, and in that we're like, let's play with the strings, see what else we can do, particularly that line, simplify your sign-in. Like it worked for that initial adoption, but maybe on specific platforms, something else works better. So we're also seeing huge success with sign in faster, which is just kind of a subtle nuance on the idea of simplification or convenience, so that other kind of like turn. And we've seen that with a subset of platforms. So we're going to be continuing to play with that as well. And I think that that's exactly what I would advise for folks is, by all means, roll out with a convenience message. But if you know that you've got a customer base that's doing something serious like taxes, bookkeeping, whatever, they may very much so want to hear that this is the hot new security position. And I did want to quickly respond to that idea of how do we talk about face fingerprint screen lock. Another way that I've seen some success is just by saying sign in by unlocking your device. And that way it kind of hits the gamut. It's biometrics, and it's also perhaps a password. But I haven't put that front and center yet. So, take it with a grain of salt. For my section, I'm really talking about demystifying passkeys experience and aligning on requirements with your teams. And it's my position, after doing this for a few years, that demystifying this experience is actually what will help your team align on requirements. In fact, it's quite critical that you continue to push and demystify the experience internally to make sure that as you have new leadership coming through, we're constantly reorging these days. You're presenting to new people who care, new stakeholders. As this gets bigger and bigger, people are going to get lost in the sauce if you let them. So you'll probably have to keep demystifying it pretty regularly. One question that you'll get a lot is, what is a passkey? And the technical answer will actually only lead to more questions, especially if someone's trying to consider the user experience specifically. So I actually vote that we lead with the benefit with our users, like Elizabeth showed, and like how Leo showed. When you're promoting this to users, do that in your internal meetings as well. To avoid getting in those weeds, you can open up with, instead of having to remember a password and maybe do a second step, users will only have to unlock their device securely to sign in. a thing that they do all the time, and they set it up however they wanted. Then you can explain the technology. What is a passkey? The way that I've explained it to tech leadership within Google, who are a little confused, is that it's a cryptographic key pair. So one key is public, registered with the app or service website the user is accessing, and the other one is private and stored only on the user's device. It's secure that way. A password or anything else is going across the internet and can be snatched out of the air by what was Leo's person's name? Mr. McFraud, something like that. He's out there fishing for those unhashed credentials flying across the internet. But with this one, that private key stays on that device. It never goes anywhere. And that's just a nice security bit to the tech. After you explain that it's a key pair, they'll say, okay, well, what's a key? Easy enough. It's a long alphanumeric string, and it's end-to-end encrypted, so no one, not even Google or the website or wherever it's hosted or created from, will see it. So it's extra long, no one ever sees it, and it can't be predicted, which is great. So there's two of those, and they hang out and say, hey, you my bud? And they say, yeah, I'm your bud, sign in. And all the user had to do was unlock their device to allow that handshake to happen. Once you get through that in your internal conversations, you'll get, won't this be too complicated for users? And thankfully, the answer is no. You will constantly have to remind your team users will be able to securely authenticate by simply unlocking their device with their biometric or screen lock. Just keep peppering that message. Remind them, show them a demo, show them FIDO's demo, and then you can explain the tech. And just like sandwich all the time. It's simple, I promise. The reason is passkeys give users the convenience they want with the security they deserve. And those are the two key critical points of passkeys that really make me personally believe in the technology, and also why Google is getting behind it. So what do users actually need to know when you're trying to get them to convert to passkeys and up their security game? They really just need to know the benefits, like how Leo showed you, like how Elizabeth showed you in her tests. They need to know how to use them. What is this going to mean? Oh, it's going to mean they're going to be able to unlock their device to authenticate. And then I think also they need to know how to learn more about it. And well, on that last screen, you saw Google's first launch. That was how we promoted it. You can see simplify your sign-in. There's the benefit. How you can use it is with fingerprint, face, or screen locks down in that body copy. And we included the word passkeys, but we downplayed it into the body copy, associating it with that familiar language. And these methods of presenting this are all outlined in the guidelines that Elizabeth mentioned. But yeah, like including that word passkeys and a nice learn more link if you have it. After we launched that, we have seen, we've continued to see 63% of users find that passkeys are easier to use in comparison to their previous sign-in method. So this is me telling you, like, this is what they need to know to convert. So after using it for a while, we survey them and we continue to survey them periodically. And we're consistently seeing that 63% find it easier to use. 62% of users feel more secure with passkeys than their previous sign-in method. Again, all they needed to know was the benefit, how to use it, and where to learn more. And they're loving it. And 76% of users who have tried them are likely to use them again in the future. So as more relying parties adopt the technology, the users, at least who have them on Google, are far more likely to go ahead and add them for, say, your website. You're also going to get this question. Why say the word passkeys at all? I said that we downplay it into the body copy, but we include it very intentionally. And that's because users deserve to know what they're using to authenticate. Shifting from a password, from a password to a passwordless experience, like with passkey, it's a paradigm shift from the world of online accounts, which people have been using a username and a password to authenticate, since the 90s, early 90s. Now we're saying, hey, try this new thing. They deserve to know what that is, and that thing is called a passkey. It's also aligned on by the industry. So you'll see that in our screens at Google, you'll see it with Android, Chrome, Microsoft, and Apple. So the other reason we want to say it is because, like Elizabeth, like Leo were talking about, the most effective time to introduce passkeys is in an authentication related moment. But people aren't online to sign in. You interrupt, you enable them to understand the benefits of this, and they can turn it on if they want, and then you need to get out of the way. People are trying to do something like check their email, reach your services, interact with your company. So you don't want to take too much time. By using the word passkeys specifically, you're enabling user self-education. The more discerning user will be able to access a huge network of content already available online, such as the stuff on the FIDO Alliance website, which will soon be called the Resource Center. And you can check out those guidelines. There's also several security blogs that we have published at Google, as well as keyword blog articles on passkeys. And we also, of course, have our Google Safety Center. There are a number of other resources online you can find, but by just including that word passkey, a user can go, oh, with passkeys, I can do this thing. But what are they? They can go search it, and they have every right to do that. It reduces the cognitive load of the user trying to access your services in that moment. It lessens the burden on the product to keep up with accurate descriptions of the underlying tech. It's one less thing you got to write if you're the writer for your team. And it also helps users acclimate to this new world where passwords could become a thing of the past. We're not quite there yet. As Elizabeth said, some people are just not going to adopt this, but they can start to educate themselves on how a passwordless experience online could be beneficial and, in fact, more secure than a password one. Somebody did ask about the FIDO Design Guidelines. Elizabeth said we go through a rigorous process to publish something. We actually have, for all of ours that we have published, we've curated a ton of passkey touch points. We grouped them into 7 themes. We selected 6 design patterns that we've pursued in 2024, audited well-known passkey deployments against some of this, and then built prototypes and ideated the experiences, tested them, did that 6 times, and then we publish. We have 14 patterns that drive business outcomes, and you can go check them all out online. You'll see that user experience research that we use to back it. You can check out our principles for passkeys and make sure your team knows them. You can get started with our design patterns. We have 2 basic ones that all deployments will pretty much need. So you can start there. Again, you can just grab our designs. You can grab Elizabeth's designs or Leo's designs. It's all better for the user overall. It's just keeping people secure and authenticated. And of course, we have some optional design patterns to expand your implementation over time, as well as additional resources. You can come to more events like this, check out our Figma UI kits, and join some community groups. The UX working group is incredibly active, and we love when new people join us and bring us those perspectives. So please do, if you haven't, join the UX working group, or at least check out the resources. And here's that link, person who asked for it. I hope you know how to scan a QR code. Otherwise, you can visit the URL that Elizabeth flashed earlier in this deck. Yeah, so what else do we have? Any questions?
Thank you so much. That was awesome. We do have questions. We always have questions. I wanted to, you all did answer this, but I do want to just dig into this like a little bit further, the desktop experience versus a mobile experience with passkeys. And really the question is, well, there's a technical part of the question and there's like a UX part of the question. The first thing is, do you see anything in your research around how folks react to the prompts around like use your, how you unlock your device to sign in on a desktop versus a mobile device, mostly because people are not as used to that kind of terminology on a desktop? And are there ways to refine that messaging for a given, given the device that a user's on, or what have you seen in that way in your research?
We have done it a little. We did do a on a smaller subset platform experiment for iOS users. So we were able to recognize that this was someone on an Apple mobile device. And we tried some of their branded language, such as Touch ID and Face ID. And we actually found that they responded to the convenience metric, or the convenience line around speed. So that is something that we've played with, but I can say that there is, especially in the desktop experience, there is a bit of a limit to the technology in the sense that by design, for security purposes, the API doesn't let the RP, the relying party, know the modality of the passkey for the user. So you can't necessarily be like, use your Touch ID, knowing that your user uses Touch ID to unlock their device, which is why I tend to say them all. But I'm curious, Elizabeth and Leo, have y'all played at all with specifics just yet, or do you know how your users might react best?
We have not gotten that deep yet. But I will say that, I've had all these questions. I still have these questions, right, as we go through stuff. And there's so many use cases, and there's so many. This is one of the most complicated things I've worked on in a long time. So a lot of it, it can be overwhelming. I mean, just to be honest. And so a lot of it, I'm like, okay, one thing at a time. And so I kind of often have to go with let's do this thing now and see how it goes. And, that's just kind of how I'm mentally handling the challenges of these unknowns, because there's just a lot. So that's my advice of real life advice is see, and if you can test with certain customers, I think that's the way to go, is to find out how they talk about it. We had all these beliefs, my native design team is all about, we need to use the iOS language. And I was like, I don't even know if they care, so it's being able to test and prove that for yourself is kind of the gold.
Yeah, I think it's just important, just from a a technical perspective, because there might be some people that are newer to FIDO on the line, that the biometric or whatever the gesture is that the user does. So it can be anything that is a local gesture or that they can use to unlock their device. So for example, if they're on Android, it could be a pattern. It could be a biometric. If you're on iOS, it could be Face ID, Touch ID. I believe Apple also leverages passwords to some extent. On a Windows device, it would be Windows Hello, which can be a PIN. You also can have a security key tied to Windows Hello. You also could have biometrics tied to Windows Hello. But from a technical perspective, that is just what is the consent or approval by the user to initiate the public-private key ceremony. And so just so folks can understand from a technical perspective, there's no biometrics being shared. None of that information that is between the user and their device is being shared with the service. It's really just that piece for consent or approval to initiate that sign-in. Because we just had a few questions around trusting of biometrics and things like that, where it really is just between the user and their device to kick off that ceremony. And but from a user perspective, they don't need to know that, right? What did you say? The two dudes say, "Yeah, you're cool, you're cool." That's essentially it. That's what they're kicking off. That they just kick that part of that off.
I will say we have seen that some users are a little concerned about where their biometrics may be shared or stored. And so at least in our platform moments where, say, Chrome is facilitating the creation of the passkey, so from the relying party, so someone's website saying create a passkey, and then say they're on Chrome, the Chrome platform API comes down hosting passkeys. We do say your biometrics are never shared, not even with Google. They stay on your device. And so you may see some users that are hesitant to do anything with their biometric, but you can reassure them. It doesn't need to be your top line message, but you can, of course, reassure them in any security messages or within your settings that your biometrics are yours and we don't keep them.
I think that is one question that I get the most. Just making rounds, doing presentations from folks that still are learning about FIDO, and they're, out of concern for their own customers. And also when we've done the user research, consumers, that is the part that, they are hesitant about. But when you explain to them, it's kept on the device. And again, to your point, Court, like whatever you just said, that short, pithy, we don't keep them. They're very much more favorable to signing up. So I particularly advocate for including just a line about the biometrics, even if there's no other security messages. If you're a consumer RP, that is something that is the biggest source of concern that I've seen personally.
Another thing that seems to be a common theme in the chat is around the security of passkeys when it comes to PIN, unlocking your passkey using a PIN. And this is something I had to come to terms a couple of months ago when I started learning more about passkeys. Again, I'm not a technical architect by any means. I'm a product designer, but one thing I realized, and it was simple enough to understand, was that a password used on a website, which is stored somewhere in the cloud on that website, is much less secure. It doesn't matter how long the password is. It's much less secure than a 4-digit PIN used to unlock your device, because that 4-digit PIN cannot be phished, right? So this is a huge difference between unlocking your account using a passkey, even if it's a 4-digit PIN, right? Compared to a very long and secure password, which can be easily phished.
There is definitely some reconciliation that folks have to come to with that, because of it's local versus on server,
Yes.
and it's just, again, when you say biometrics or PIN, sometimes a consumer can be confused, like, well, you said we're not doing passwords, so isn't a PIN? So right, there are, we do have recommendations for how to deal with that. And usually you can, in Court and Elizabeth, for people that want to dig deeper, we do have, like a expanded version of like a FAQ that we provide content for that includes information like that. Because there are going to be users that are going to want to dig in more into this, right? That's not take things at face value necessarily, more like prosumer types of folks.
Yeah, folks will be like, how are 4 digits more secure than my password phrase that I've been using for 20 years? And it's because the PIN isn't actually the passkey. The PIN is just how you access it.
Right.
The passkey itself, like I showed, is a long alphanumeric string. It's actually 2. And no one can see it. Now, someone also said, I think there are other methods like security keys, Chrome profiles, third-party password managers. Do you have to use a PIN required or biometrics to use passkeys? The answer is actually no. You can use a hardware security key that is FIDO 2, so enabled for user verification. And that is something they could plug in. So passkeys can be stored on users' personal devices or on hardware security keys. And then they would just plug it in. Depending on how you set it up, you could use user presence, which is just that they acknowledge that they have the key, they touch it. Or you could require a PIN associated with that hardware security key for full user verification. So you don't necessarily need to have a device lock set up. You can just have it that way. But largely passkeys will likely be on devices for users, at least in a lot of the consumer experiences, as opposed to corporate experiences, and they will just be unlocking their device.
And you mentioned and talked about the term passkey, including the term passkey for familiarity, also so that folks signing in, they deserve to know what the tech is behind how they're signing in. How have you all viewed the passkey icon, and how is that incorporated into the guidelines? And for folks, so the passkey icon, this is in the middle of this QR code is a version of the passkey icon. And how do you see that, invoking any kind of feeling with consumers, or are we striving for something with that?
Very briefly from my end, I think one of the key actions to success is unity, I guess. Using that icon consistently on call to actions, or I think the FIDO Alliance UX working group has quite a few interesting
I think we lost Leo.
of user experience is very important. Whether we like that icon or not, I think everyone should use it, because this way it will be easier and easier to recognize as a secure method of authentication.
Yeah, we've been also looking at it like, again, we look into our Google friends who are leading the pack, but to help us understand like best ways to do it. But we've kind of leaned into like, yes, we want to use the official logo, the official icon, but you can surround it with illustration and things that might make it feel like it's your brand. So it's but not like messing with the original part of it. So there's ways to like weave it in without changing it, so it's like always the same. But that's what we've been exploring, kind of like where to use it, how much to use it. But when we can, we like absolutely will.
Yeah, I think it's the hope with using the term passkeys and using a pretty consistent visual is that users will start to recognize passkeys without us actually even having to say passkeys. So the more we can create this consistent experience across the web, the more users will just recognize it. It'll be less cognitive load for them. It'll be less burden on the product to explain exactly which authentication factor is being leveraged in a given moment.
Yeah, and I think there is, with any new consumer technology, there can be thoughts around how much of a learning curve there is for consumers. And I tend to say, once they've done it once or twice and had a positive experience, and then they see the same thing somewhere else, they will be very much more apt to do that. And Jin, in the questions, was comparing it to like the contactless symbol or like a chip card symbol, very, very similar, just to know, okay, this means I can do this. And it has connotations of security or ease and things like that. I think those are the kinds of attributes we would love to see associated with the icon, with the passkey icon as well.
And that's exactly why I still support Simplify Your Sign-In, because I'm like, everybody's seen Google, so I feel like it's gonna seem familiar. So that was my logic behind that, is like finding something that's familiar. That's the basic. It's like familiar language, familiar things they've seen before. I mean, even, it's like, it's more like, have they seen that? And then they come here and they've seen it and they're like, I feel safe because they use that wording. That's where I'm kind of hedging my bets on some of those things, when you have stuff that you're not familiar with and you're just like, let's make it a lot of places. Now we all know the tap. We all know the tap now.
And believe me, people did not think consumers were able to do that. I was there. They didn't think so. They were wrong. We are capable of so much as a society.
It just takes time sometimes to adopt.
It takes one or two tries. So any parting words? And I want to thank you, all three of you, so sincerely for your time today. And I want to thank our attendees for all their great questions and comments. But any parting words as we wrap today's webinar?
Working group. We're a fun bunch. Yeah. And also explore the other resources through FIDO Alliance. There is a ton more on all of the topics that we talked about today. Not just UX stuff, but having those conversations internally. about the technology and how to speak about the ROI from implementation to your stakeholders.
Yeah, I think great working group. This is where it's a great to share this information. This is brand new. The other day I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening and AI is happening. Oh, my brain. So much new technology. And that's how we learn, is to talk about it with each other. So like doing this stuff and joining the working group. And I just even read the Slack in the working group. And I'm like, oh, look at all the stuff I've just learned with engineers talking about things. So I just say that's the community part is like how I get through it and learn and do it. Leo, wisdom, since you started us off, you can end it. He's like, yeah. Cool.
And the last question, how do you join the working group? Please get in touch with us to become a member of the FIDO Alliance, and then you can join the working group. Info@FIDOalliance.org, Megan@FIDOalliance.org. Please reach out. We'd love to work with you more closely. And with that, we'll wrap up. And please join us next week for our next webinar. Same day, same time, same location. We'll be in touch. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for attending today.
Thank you.